The morning sun rose slowly over the farming colony on Velta 7. Orange light spread across the green fields, where humans had built their homes far from Earth. The colony was small, just 200 people living in simple buildings made of metal and local stone. They grew food, raised animals, and lived peaceful lives. Nobody here carried weapons. Nobody here expected trouble. Una Park walked through the wet grass before anyone else woke up. She was 17 years old, thin and quiet, with long black hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Most people in the colony barely noticed her. She was the kind of girl who sat in corners reading old books, who rarely spoke in groups, who seemed to fade into the background of any room. Her teachers called her average. Her neighbors called her shy. Nobody called her special. But every morning, while the colony slept, Una walked 3 kilometers into the forest valley with her grandfather's old rifle on her shoulder. The valley was her secret place. Tall trees with blue leaves created shadows where she could practice without anyone watching. She set up targets on rocks and fallen logs. Then she would shoot again and again until her shoulder ached and her fingers knew the rifle better than her own heartbeat. Her grandfather had taught her this. Dongsu Park was 73 years old, with white hair and deep lines on his face. He walked with a limp from an old injury he never explained. While other grandparents in the colony told stories about Earth's beautiful oceans and mountains, Dongsu told different stories. He told stories about wars, about soldiers, about what humans could do when survival demanded it. "The galaxy thinks we are soft," he told Una once, cleaning his rifle with careful hands. "They see our farms and our schools and our peaceful colonies. They forget what we were before we reached the stars. They forget what we can become again." Una did not fully understand what he meant, but she loved the old man, so she learned what he taught her. She learned to shoot. She learned to move quietly through forests. She learned to watch and wait and think before acting. That morning, Una hit 12 targets in a row without missing. She allowed herself a small smile, then began the walk home. When she reached the colony, people were starting their day. Farmers headed to the fields. Children ran toward the small school building. Her mother, Hannah, stood outside their home hanging wet clothes to dry. "You were out early again," Hannah said. It was not a question. "Just walking," Una replied. She had never told her parents about the shooting practice. Her father would worry. Her mother would ask too many questions. Inside the house, her father, Jiwon, sat at the kitchen table looking at a communication screen. His face was troubled. "What is wrong, Una asked. Jiwon looked up. He was a colony engineer, responsible for keeping the water systems and power generators working. He was a practical man who solved problems with tools and calculations. He did not believe in worrying about things he could not control. "Nothing," he said. "Just some strange messages from the other colonies. Communication problems, probably. Nothing to worry about." But Una saw the way his eyes moved, the way his fingers tapped nervously on the table. Something was bothering him. That afternoon, Una visited her grandfather in his small home at the edge of the colony. Dongsu lived alone since his wife died 5 years ago. His house was simple but clean, filled with old photographs and older memories. "The other colonies have stopped responding," Una said, sitting across from him. "Father thinks it is communication problems. But I saw his face. He is scared." Dongsu was quiet for a long moment. He looked out his window at the peaceful colony, at the children playing, at the farmers returning from the fields. "Come with me," he said finally. He led her to a locked closet in his bedroom. From his pocket, he took out a key he wore on a chain around his neck. The closet opened to reveal something Una had never seen before. Weapons, real weapons. Not just the hunting rifle she practiced with, but military equipment. 3 rifles, 2 pistols, boxes of ammunition, a knife with a blade that gleamed even in the dim light. "Grandfather," Una whispered, "where did you get these?" "I brought them from Earth," Dongsu said. 40 years ago, when I first came to the colonies. Everyone said I was foolish. They said we were entering an era of peace. They said humans would never need weapons again." He picked up one of the rifles, checking it with practiced hands. "I hoped they were right, but hope is not a strategy." He turned to face his granddaughter. His eyes were serious in a way she had never seen before. "Listen to me carefully, Una. Something bad is coming. I can feel it the way I felt it during the wars on Earth." That silence from the other colonies is not a communication problem. Something has happened to them, and it will happen to us too. Yuna felt cold despite the warm afternoon. What should we do? Tell the colony leaders? Prepare defenses? Dongsu shook his head sadly. These people have forgotten how to fight. They will not believe the danger until it is too late. But you, Yuna, you are different. You remember the old ways because I taught them to you. He pressed the hunting rifle into her hands. If something happens to me, to your parents, to everyone else, you must survive. You must fight. You must make them pay for every life they take. Make who pay? Yuna asked. Grandfather, you are scaring me. Good, Dongsu said. Fear will keep you alive. Fear will keep you sharp. He put his weathered hand on her shoulder. The galaxy forgot what humans are capable of. If the time comes, you will remind them. That night, Yuna could not sleep. She lay in her bed listening to the quiet sounds of the colony. Dogs barking in the distance, the hum of the power generators, her parents talking softly in the next room. Through her window, she watched the stars. Somewhere out there, among those millions of points of light, something was moving toward them. She did not know what it was. She did not know when it would arrive, but her grandfather's words echoed in her mind, and she believed him. Around midnight, she saw them, lights in the sky that were not stars. They moved too fast, too purposefully. They grew larger as they descended toward the colony. Yuna got out of bed. She dressed quickly in dark clothes. She grabbed the rifle her grandfather had given her and filled her pockets with ammunition. Then she slipped out her window and ran toward the forest valley, toward the shadows and the hiding places she knew so well. Behind her, the first alien ships began to land. The peaceful era was over, and Yuna Park, the quiet girl nobody noticed, was about to show the galaxy what one human could do. The alien ships landed in the center of the colony with a sound like thunder. Yuna watched from the tree line at the edge of the forest, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. The ships were black and angular, like insects made of metal. Ramps lowered from their bellies and soldiers poured out into the early morning darkness. The aliens were tall, nearly 2 meters each, with gray skin and 4 arms. They wore armor that reflected the light from the colony's street lamps. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could hurt them. Yuna counted them, 40 soldiers, 8 ships. They spread through the colony like water flowing through cracks, efficient and unstoppable. The screaming started almost immediately. Colony residents stumbled out of their homes in confusion, still wearing their sleeping clothes. They did not understand what was happening. They raised their hands in surrender, tried to speak, tried to reason with the invaders. The aliens did not care. They grabbed people roughly, forcing them toward the town square. Anyone who resisted was struck down. Yuna wanted to run into the colony and help. She wanted to scream, to fight, to do something. But her grandfather's training held her still. Watch first, he had always said. Understand your enemy before you act. A dead hero saves no one. So she watched, and she learned. The aliens communicated through devices on their wrists, speaking in a language of clicks and hisses. They seemed bored, as if this attack was routine work, as if conquering human colonies was something they did every day. Maybe it was. Yuna thought about the silent colonies, the unanswered messages. How many other settlements had fallen to these creatures? How many humans had already died? A new alien appeared from the largest ship. This one wore different armor, decorated with symbols that might have been medals or ranks. He walked slowly, surveying the captured colonists with obvious contempt. When he spoke, his voice was amplified by his armor. Humans of this colony, he said in broken but understandable speech. I am Commander Tovik of the Vorn Dominion. Your world now belongs to us. Resist and you die. Obey and you may be useful as workers. He made a sound that might have been laughter. We have taken 200 of your colonies in this sector. You are nothing special. You are simply next. 200 colonies. Yuna felt sick. How many people was that? Tens of thousands? Hundreds of thousands? And nobody had warned them. Nobody had fought back hard enough to send a message. Movement near her grandfather's house caught her attention. Dongsu was standing on his porch with a rifle in his hands. Even from this distance, Yuna could see the cold determination on his face. No, she thought. Grandfather, no. There are too many. Dongsu raised his rifle and fired. The shot hit a Vorn soldier in the neck, finding a gap in the armor. The alien fell, dead before it touched the ground. For a moment, everyone froze. The colonists, the soldiers. Even Commander Tovik looked surprised. Then chaos erupted. Dongsu fired again and again, moving with speed that seemed impossible for his age. Two more soldiers fell. The Vorn scrambled for cover, shocked that anyone on this peaceful farming world would fight back. But 40 against 1 was never a fair fight. Energy beams cut through the air. Dongsu dodged the first volley, ducking behind a water tank. He kept shooting, kept fighting, giving the colonists precious seconds of confusion that some used to run, to hide, to escape into the darkness. Yuna watched her grandfather fight, tears streaming down her face. She raised her own rifle, ready to join him, ready to die beside him if necessary. Then Dongsu looked directly at her. Across the distance, their eyes met. He shook his head once, firmly. Stay hidden. Stay alive. A energy beam hit him in the chest. Dongsu Park fell to his knees. Even then, he tried to raise his rifle one more time. Another beam struck him, and he collapsed. Commander Tovik walked toward the body. He kicked the rifle away from Dongsu's hand and looked down with something like curiosity. This one had spirit, Tovik said. The rest of you could learn from him. He turned to his soldiers. Gather the survivors, kill anyone else who resists, and find out if there are more weapons hidden in this colony. Yuna pressed her hand against her mouth to stop herself from screaming. Her grandfather was dead. The man who had raised her, trained her, believed in her, was gone. She wanted to collapse. She wanted to give up. She wanted the pain to stop. Instead, she remembered his final words to her. If something happens to me, you must survive. You must fight. You must make them pay. Yuna wiped her eyes with her sleeve. The tears stopped. Something else took their place. Not rage exactly. Rage was hot and wild and made people stupid. This was cold. This was sharp. This was the focused clarity of a hunter who had found her prey. She melted back into the forest, moving silently through the trees she knew so well. Behind her, the Vorn finished securing the colony. They thought the fight was over. They thought one old man was the only threat. They were wrong. Yuna found a hidden spot on a ridge overlooking the colony. She checked her rifle. 47 rounds. She checked the knife on her belt. She checked the small pack of supplies she always carried during her morning practices. It was not much. 40 soldiers with advanced weapons and armor against one teenage girl with an old rifle. But her grandfather had killed 3 of them before they took him down. 37 remained. Yuna settled into a comfortable position, watching the alien patrols begin their sweeps of the colony perimeter. She studied their movements, their patterns, their weaknesses. She noted which ones seemed alert and which ones seemed bored. She memorized their routes. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky in shades of red and orange. It was going to be a beautiful day, a terrible day, the first day of a war that only she knew had begun. Down in the colony, she saw her parents being herded into the town square with the other survivors. They were alive, for now. Yuna made a silent promise, to her grandfather, to her parents, to everyone the Vorn had taken from their peaceful lives. I will get them back, she thought, and I will make these aliens understand what happens when you hurt the people I love. She raised her rifle, found her first target in the scope, and waited for the perfect moment. The Vorn thought they had conquered this colony. They were about to learn that the conquest had only begun. Yuna waited 6 hours before she took her first shot. 6 hours of watching, 6 hours of learning, 6 hours of becoming invisible among the rocks and trees of the valley she knew better than any place in the universe. The Vorn had set up a perimeter around the colony. Pairs of soldiers walked regular patrol routes through the surrounding forest, checking for any colonists who might have escaped. They moved carelessly, talking to each other, never looking up into the trees or down into the shadowed ravines. Why would they? They had conquered 200 human colonies without any real resistance. One old man with a rifle had surprised them, but he was dead now. The threat was over. Yuna studied each patrol carefully. She noted their timing, their paths, their habits. She identified the gaps in their coverage. She found the blind spots where she could move unseen. Then she chose her target. Two soldiers walked along a narrow trail at the bottom of the valley. They were 400 meters from her position on the ridge. A difficult shot, but not impossible. She had made harder shots during practice. Yuna controlled her breathing the way her grandfather had taught her. She relaxed her muscles. She let the world narrow down to just the rifle, the target, and the space between them. She squeezed the trigger. The first soldier dropped without a sound. His partner froze, confused, looking around for the source of the attack. He never found it. Yuna's second shot was just as clean. She stayed still after the kills, watching for any reaction. The shots had been loud, but sound traveled strangely in the valley. The other patrols were too far away to hear. Nobody came to investigate. Yuna climbed down from her position and approached the bodies carefully. She searched them quickly, taking a communication device from one soldier's wrist and an energy pistol from the other's belt. The pistol was heavier than she expected, with controls she did not understand. She would figure it out later. The communication device crackled with alien voices. Yuna could not understand the words, but she recognized the tone. Routine check-ins. Bored soldiers reporting nothing interesting. She moved deeper into the forest, finding a new hiding spot 2 kilometers from the first. Never stay in one place too long. Another lesson from her grandfather. An hour passed, then 2. The communication device suddenly erupted with urgent voices. Someone had found the bodies. Yuna listened to the confusion and fear in those alien voices, and she felt something strange. Not happiness exactly, but satisfaction. The hunt had begun. Commander Tavik's voice cut through the chatter, sharp and commanding. Yuna could not understand his words, but she understood his tone. He was sending more soldiers to investigate. Good. She found a new position overlooking the trail where the bodies lay. Sure enough, 8 soldiers arrived, moving more carefully than the first patrol. They examined the bodies. They looked at the surrounding trees and rocks. They spread out to search the area. Yuna let them search. She stayed perfectly still, hidden in a crack between 2 boulders that she had discovered years ago while exploring. The soldiers walked within 10 meters of her hiding spot without seeing her. When they finally relaxed, when they decided the shooter was long gone, Yuna struck again. 2 more soldiers fell before the others could react. They dove for cover, firing their energy weapons wildly into the forest. Trees exploded into flames. Rocks shattered. The noise was tremendous, but Yuna was already moving, crawling through a narrow drainage channel that led away from the chaos. By the time the Vorn soldiers gathered enough courage to advance on her last position, she was 500 meters away, finding a new spot to watch and wait. 3 more soldiers died over the next 4 hours. Each time, Yuna struck from a different location. Each time, she disappeared before they could respond. Each time, the fear in their voices grew stronger. As the sun began to set, Yuna found a secure hiding spot beneath an overhanging rock formation. She ate a small meal from her pack and listened to the communication device. The Vorn were scared now. She could hear it clearly, even without understanding their language. They no longer sounded bored or confident. They sounded like prey that had suddenly realized they were being hunted. One transmission made her pause. A soldier speaking rapidly, his voice high with fear. Then Commander Tovik responding, his tone demanding information. Then a phrase she almost understood, repeated several times. Human, juvenile, female. They had seen her. Someone had caught a glimpse of their attacker and reported back. Yuna smiled in the darkness. Good. Let them know who was killing them. Let them understand that their enemy was not an army, not a military force, but a single teenage girl with a rifle and a reason to fight. The next transmission was Tavik's voice, loud and angry. She heard other voices responding, heard the fear and confusion. She heard something that sounded like a question, repeated by multiple soldiers. Who was shooting that human teen? Yuna checked her ammunition, 33 rounds remaining. She had killed 7 soldiers in one day. 33 remained, plus the commander. It was not enough, not yet. But night was falling, and night belonged to hunters who knew the land. Night belonged to those who could move silently through darkness. Night belonged to her. Una strapped the communication device to her wrist. She tucked the energy pistol into her belt next to her knife. She shouldered her grandfather's rifle and stepped out into the growing shadows. The Vorn controlled the colony. They held the hostages. They had superior weapons and numbers and technology. But Una controlled the forest. She controlled the valley. She controlled the night. And by morning, even more of them would be dead. She moved through the darkness like a ghost, silent and deadly, already planning her next attack. The quiet girl nobody noticed was gone. In her place was something the galaxy had forgotten existed, a human with nothing left to lose. Commander Tovik stood in the colony's main building, staring at the holographic display in front of him. 14 red dots marked the locations where his soldiers had died. 14 of his elite warriors, killed in less than 2 days by a single enemy, a human child. He had contacted his superiors and requested information about humans. What he received made his 4 hands tremble. The files showed human history, centuries of wars, weapons designed to kill millions at once, soldiers trained from childhood to fight and die. Humans had slaughtered each other for thousands of years over land, resources, beliefs, and sometimes for no reason at all. They were perhaps the most violent species the Vorn had ever encountered. But the files were old. The current assessment classified humans as a pacified species with no military capability. They had given up their weapons. They had embraced peace. They were farmers and scientists, no threat to anyone. Someone had made a terrible mistake. Tovik activated his communication system. All patrols report to command immediately. No one goes into the forest alone. No one leaves the colony perimeter. His remaining soldiers gathered in the town square, nervous and exhausted. They had not slept properly since the attacks began. Every shadow seemed to hide an enemy. Every sound made them jump. "We are dealing with a single human," Tovik told them, "a juvenile female. She has an old projectile weapon and limited ammunition. She is alone." He paused, looking at each of his soldiers in turn. "We are warriors of the Vorn Dominion. We have conquered 200 worlds. We will not be defeated by a child." But even as he spoke, he saw the doubt in their eyes. 14 soldiers dead, not to an army, not to advanced weapons, to one girl with a rifle. Meanwhile, in the forest, Una listened to the enemy communications and planned her next move. She had learned to recognize some Vorn words over the past day. Human was easy. Female, she figured out from context. Kill and find and where appeared frequently. They were searching for her with increasing desperation. She had also discovered something useful. The Vorn relied heavily on thermal imaging to detect targets. Their helmets could see body heat through darkness and foliage. That was how they had spotted her briefly the day before. But thermal imaging had weaknesses. Water blocked it, mud confused it, and Una had grown up swimming in the cold streams of the valley, covering herself with clay when hunting animals that could smell human scent. She found a stream and covered herself completely with cold mud. It was uncomfortable and heavy, but it would hide her heat signature. She became invisible to their technology. That night, she approached closer to the colony than she had dared before. The Vorn had pulled back their patrols, clustering near the buildings for safety. It made them feel protected. It made them easy targets. Una set up on a small hill overlooking the colony. She could see soldiers moving between buildings, could see the hostages gathered in the town square under guard. She spotted her parents among the prisoners. They were alive, sitting close together, holding hands. A patrol of 4 soldiers walked along the colony's edge, trying to look confident. Una waited until they passed the darkest section of the perimeter. Her first shot dropped the lead soldier. The other 3 scrambled for cover, but there was nowhere to hide. She took her time, placing each shot carefully. In less than a minute, all 4 were dead. Chaos erupted in the colony. Soldiers ran in all directions, firing their weapons at shadows. Commander Tovik's voice screamed over the communications, demanding information. Then came the transmission that made Una pause. A soldier speaking rapidly, his voice cracking with fear. "Command, I have visual on the shooter. It is the juvenile human. She is on the northern hill. She is alone and—" The transmission cut off as Una's bullet found him. Silence on the communication channel. Then another voice trembling. Kren is down. She got Kren. Did anyone see where? Tovik interrupted. All units. Who is shooting that human teen? Someone eliminate her now. Una smiled grimly as she withdrew into the darkness. 19 dead now. 21 remaining, plus the commander. Over the next hour, she circled the colony, striking from different positions. Each time the Vorn thought they had located her, she appeared somewhere else. Each time they fired at her last position, she was already gone. By midnight, she had killed 4 more soldiers. The Vorn were completely demoralized. Some refused to leave the buildings. Others demanded that Tovik call for reinforcements. A few whispered about retreat. Una found a safe hiding spot and allowed herself a brief rest. Her body ached from constant movement. Her shoulder was bruised from the rifle's recoil. She had eaten almost nothing in 2 days. But she could not stop. Not yet. She looked at her ammunition count. 17 rounds remained. 23 of the original 40 soldiers were dead. But 17 rounds might not be enough for 17 enemies, especially if they became more careful. She needed new weapons. The energy pistol she had taken from the first patrol sat in her belt. She had watched the Vorn use similar weapons and had figured out the basic controls. A button for power, a trigger for firing, a dial that probably adjusted the intensity. She tested it on a rock. The rock exploded into fragments. Una nodded, satisfied. The weapon was not accurate at long range, but for close combat, it would serve well. In the colony, Commander Tovik made a decision that would change everything. He walked to where the hostages sat huddled together and grabbed one of them by the arm. It was an elderly woman, too frightened to resist. I know you can hear me, human child, Tovik announced loudly, knowing Una was listening through the captured communication device. You will surrender before sunrise, or I will begin executing prisoners. 1 every hour until you show yourself. He threw the elderly woman to the ground and drew his weapon. The choice is yours. Their lives for your freedom. What will you do? In the darkness of the forest, Una heard every word. She looked toward the colony, toward the hostages, toward her parents. The Vorn thought they had found her weakness. They thought threatening innocent lives would make her give up. They were wrong. Una began moving toward the colony, but not to surrender. She was done hiding in the forest. She was done picking off soldiers from a distance. It was time to bring the war to them. The night air was cold against Una's mud-covered skin as she crept toward the colony. She had 12 rounds left in her grandfather's rifle and a Vorn energy pistol she had only fired once. Against 17 enemy soldiers with advanced weapons and armor, it should have been impossible odds. But Una had something the Vorn did not have. She knew this colony. She knew every building, every street, every hidden corner. Her father had helped design the water systems that ran beneath the ground. Her mother had planted the gardens that grew along the walls. This was her home, and she would not let strangers destroy it. She reached the colony's edge just before midnight. The Vorn had set up bright lights around the perimeter, trying to eliminate the shadows she used for cover. But they had made a mistake. They had placed the lights in obvious positions, creating patterns of brightness and darkness that Una could predict and avoid. She moved through the gaps like water through rocks, silent and patient. Her first target was the communication tower. A single soldier stood guard at its base, looking tired and scared. Una approached from behind, using the knife her grandfather had given her. The soldier never made a sound. She climbed the tower quickly and found the main transmission unit. She did not destroy it. Instead, she carved a message into the metal panel with her knife. 1 for every colonist you touch. Let them find it. Let them understand what awaited them. Back on the ground, Una moved deeper into the colony. She stayed in the shadows between buildings, listening to the sounds of enemy soldiers moving nearby. They were jumpy, firing at every noise, seeing threats everywhere. She used their fear against them. A thrown rock made soldiers run toward the east side of the colony. While they searched for an enemy that was not there, Una slipped into a building on the west side. It was the colony's food storage facility, connected to other buildings through underground passages that only the original colonists knew about. She moved through the darkness beneath the ground, emerging in different locations to strike and disappear. A soldier alone in a hallway, 2 soldiers guarding a doorway. Each time she attacked, She was gone before the others could respond. The Vorn began to panic. They heard shots from inside buildings that should have been secure. They found bodies in places they had checked minutes before. They could not understand how one person could be everywhere at once. In the town square, the hostages heard the chaos and began to hope. A young boy named Taiho, only 8 years old, saw a shadow move across a rooftop. For a moment, the figure was visible in the moonlight. A thin girl with long dark hair, carrying a rifle. "It is Yuna," he whispered to his mother. "Yuna from school. She is fighting them." The word spread quietly among the hostages. The quiet girl, the one who sat alone, the one nobody noticed. She was out there, hunting the hunters. Yuna heard something on the communication device that made her pause. Commander Tovik was speaking to his remaining soldiers, but his voice had changed. The confidence was gone. He sounded desperate. "She is just one human," he said. "One juvenile female. We have better weapons. We have armor. We have training. How is this happening?" One of his soldiers responded with a trembling voice. "Sir, I have read the human history files. During their global wars, they killed millions of each other. They developed weapons that could destroy entire cities. They fought until they had nothing left, then kept fighting anyway." A pause. "They forgot how to be violent, sir. But this one seems to remember." Tovik was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke again, and his voice was cold. "We have the hostages. That is our advantage. Bring 10 of them to the main building. If this human child wants war, we will show her the cost of war." Yuna heard every word. She checked her ammunition. 8 rounds in the rifle, a fully charged energy pistol, and a knife that had already tasted Vorn blood. It was not enough. It would have to be enough. She moved toward the main building, staying in the underground passages when possible. The Vorn were bringing hostages inside, using them as shields. It was a smart strategy. Yuna could not shoot through crowds of innocent people, but there were other ways to fight. She found the building's power controls in a basement maintenance room. Her father had shown her this system years ago, explaining how the colony's electricity worked. She studied the panels for a moment, then began disconnecting circuits. The lights in the main building went dark. Screams erupted from inside. Soldiers shouted at each other. Energy weapons fired at nothing, their bright beams revealing positions for anyone watching. Yuna was watching. She entered through a window on the second floor, moving through the darkness with sure feet. She knew this building. She had played here as a child, explored every room, found every hiding spot. The Vorn did not know this building. They stumbled and crashed into furniture. They fired at sounds and shadows. In the confusion, 2 of them shot each other. Yuna moved among them like a ghost. Her knife found throats. Her energy pistol fired at close range. She was silent and swift and absolutely deadly. By the time the emergency lights activated, 4 more soldiers were dead, and Yuna was gone, disappeared into the ventilation system that ran through the building's ceiling. Commander Tovik stood in the middle of the chaos, his 4 hands shaking. Around him, the surviving soldiers looked at each other with wild eyes. 8 of them remained. 8 soldiers from an elite unit of 40. One human teenager had killed 32 of them. "Seal the building," Tovik commanded. "Every door, every window. She is in here somewhere. We will find her." In the darkness of the ventilation system, Yuna listened and smiled. The commander thought he was trapping her. He was wrong. She was exactly where she wanted to be, close to the hostages, close to her parents, close to the end. The hunt was almost over. The main building had become a fortress. Commander Tovik sealed every entrance and posted his remaining 8 soldiers at strategic positions throughout the structure. The 10 hostages, including Yuna's parents, were held in the central conference room on the ground floor. Tovik believed he had finally trapped his enemy. The human girl was somewhere in the building, probably in the ventilation system or the maintenance passages. She could not escape. She could not hide forever. Eventually, they would find her. He was thinking like a Vorn commander. He was not thinking like a human. Yuna moved through the ventilation system with careful precision. She had played in these passages as a child, crawling through them during games with friends. She knew every turn, every junction, every access point. The system was designed for human maintenance workers, which meant it was slightly too small for the larger Vorn soldiers. She was safe up here. But safety was not her goal. Through the ventilation grates, she observed the enemy positions. 2 soldiers guarded the front entrance. 2 more watched the back. 1 patrolled the second-floor hallway. 1 stood outside the conference room where the hostages waited. Commander Tavik and his last soldiers stayed in the control room, monitoring security cameras that showed nothing useful in the darkness. 8 targets. She had 5 rounds left in her rifle and limited charge in the energy pistol. Yuna began with the soldier on the second floor. She waited until he walked beneath a ventilation grate, then dropped behind him. Her knife was silent. Her hands were steady. Another enemy fell without raising an alarm. She took his weapon and added it to her collection. Now she had 2 Vorn energy pistols and her grandfather's rifle. The soldier outside the conference room was next. She approached through a different passage, one that led to a small storage closet connected to the main hallway. The door opened silently. The soldier had his back to her, watching the conference room door. He died before he knew she was there. Inside the conference room, the hostages heard a soft thump. Yuna's mother, Hana, looked toward the door with frightened eyes. Her husband Jiwon squeezed her hand, trying to offer comfort neither of them felt. The door opened slowly. A figure stepped through, covered in dried mud and blood, carrying weapons in both hands. "Yuna?" Hana whispered. Yuna raised a finger to her lips. "Be quiet." Her parents stared at her, barely recognizing the fierce warrior their daughter had become. "The back exit," Yuna whispered to the hostages. "Wait for my signal, then run to the forest. Head for the valley. I have supplies hidden there." "Come with us," her father said. Yuna shook her head. "I am not finished yet." She slipped back into the hallway before anyone could argue. Behind her, the hostages began preparing to move. The 4 soldiers guarding the entrances were harder to approach. They had positioned themselves with clear sight lines, watching for any movement. But they were watching the obvious approaches. They were not watching the ceiling. Yuna climbed back into the ventilation system and crawled toward the front entrance. Above the 2 soldiers, she found an access panel that led to the building's electrical junction. She disconnected the emergency lights. Darkness fell again. The soldiers shouted in confusion, waving their weapons at shadows. Yuna dropped from the ceiling behind them. Her energy pistols fired twice. Both soldiers collapsed. At the back entrance, the remaining 2 guards heard the commotion and ran toward the front of the building. Yuna circled around through the passages and met them from behind. 4 more dead. Only Commander Tovik and 1 soldier remain. "Now," Yuna said into the captured communication device. In the conference room, her father led the hostages through the back exit and into the night. They ran toward the forest, toward safety, toward freedom. Yuna watched them go from a window, making sure they escaped before turning her attention to the final targets. The control room was on the 3rd floor. Tovik and his last soldier had barricaded themselves inside, watching the security monitors desperately. "What is happening?" the soldier asked, his voice high with fear. "Where are the others?" Tovik did not answer. He was watching a monitor that showed the hostages running toward the forest. His leverage was gone. His soldiers were gone. His mission had failed completely. A noise in the ceiling made both Vorn look up. The ventilation grate crashed down. Yuna dropped through the opening, rolling as she hit the floor. Her energy pistol fired twice, dropping the last soldier before he could raise his weapon. Then it was just her and Commander Tavik. The Vorn commander was larger than the others, stronger, better trained. He moved faster than Yuna expected, knocking the energy pistol from her hand and grabbing her throat with 2 of his 4 arms. "Impressive," he hissed, lifting her off the ground. "You killed 39 of my soldiers, 1 human child against the Vorn Dominion." His grip tightened. "But it ends here." Yuna could not breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. Her hands clawed at his arms, but his grip was like iron. Then she remembered the knife at her belt. Her fingers found the handle. She drew the blade and drove it into the gap between Tovik's armor plates, right where his arm met his shoulder. He screamed and dropped her. Yuna rolled away, gasping for air. Tovik pulled the knife from his wound with a snarl of rage. Purple blood dripped from the injury. "You will die slowly for that," he promised. He lunged toward her. Yuna raised her grandfather's rifle, the weapon she had carried throughout this entire nightmare. The last connection to the man who had trained her. She had 3 rounds left. She used 1. The bullet caught Tovik in the chest, punching through his armor at close range. He staggered but did not fall. Vorn were tough. Vorn could survive wounds that would kill other species. Yuna used her second round. This one hit his leg and he dropped to one knee. Still he tried to reach her, crawling forward with hatred burning in his eyes. "Your species was supposed to be peaceful," he gasped. "Our intelligence said you had no military, no weapons, no threat." Yuna stood over him, her rifle aimed at his head. "You scanned our weapons," she said quietly. "You did not scan our history. You did not scan our hearts." She pulled the trigger one final time. Commander Tovik of the Vorn Dominion fell and did not rise again. Yuna stood alone in the control room, surrounded by silence. Her body trembled with exhaustion. Her hands shook as the adrenaline faded. But it was over. The invaders were dead. The colonists were free. She had won. Yuna collapsed against the wall and let herself cry. She cried for her grandfather. She cried for the colonists who had died in the initial attack. She cried for the girl she had been before this nightmare began. The quiet girl who read books and practiced shooting in the forest, who never imagined she would become a killer. But mostly she cried because she was alive, and the people she loved were safe. The war was over, or so she thought. 3 days passed after the battle. The colonists returned from hiding to find their home damaged but not destroyed. They buried their dead, including Yuna's grandfather Dongsu, in a quiet ceremony at the edge of the forest he had loved. 23 colonists had died in the initial attack. 23 innocent people who had wanted nothing more than peaceful lives on a distant world. Yuna stood at her grandfather's grave long after the others had left. She placed his empty rifle case on the mound of dirt. The weapon itself she kept, cleaned and maintained the way he had taught her. "I remembered," she whispered. "I made them pay. I hope it was enough." Her parents watched from a distance, giving her space to grieve. They looked at their daughter differently now. Everyone did. The quiet girl who faded into backgrounds had become something else entirely. A warrior. A survivor. A symbol. Yuna did not feel like a symbol. She felt tired and sad and older than her 17 years. But there was one more thing she needed to do. On the fourth day, a new ship appeared in the sky above the colony. It was larger than the attack vessels, marked with the same symbols of the Vorn Dominion. A rescue ship coming to collect the victorious soldiers. They would find something very different waiting for them. Yuna stood alone in the colony's main square as the ship landed. She had washed the mud and blood from her skin. She had dressed in clean clothes. She carried no weapons. The rescue ship's ramp lowered, and a dozen Vorn soldiers marched out. They moved confidently at first, expecting to meet their fellow warriors. Then they saw the empty colony, the damaged buildings. The single human girl standing calmly in their path. Their leader approached Yuna slowly, his weapon raised. "Where is Commander Tovik?" he demanded. "Where are our soldiers?" Yuna reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. She held it up for the Vorn to see. "Dead," she said simply. "All of them." The Vorn leader stared at her. "That is impossible. 40 elite soldiers do not fall to farmers." "They did not fall to farmers." Yuna met his eyes without flinching. "They fell to me." She threw the data chip to the ground between them. "That contains recordings from Commander Tovik's helmet. Every battle, every death, every moment of your soldiers' failure." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Take it to your leaders. Show them what happened here. Show them what one human child did to your elite warriors." The Vorn leader bent slowly to pick up the chip. His hands trembled slightly. "Then ask yourselves a question," Yuna continued. "What happens when you face our adults, our trained soldiers, our billions of people who have forgotten more about war than your Dominion has ever learned?" She stepped forward, and the armed Vorn soldiers actually stepped back. "We wanted peace," Yuna said. "We gave up our weapons. We built farms instead of fortresses. We chose to be gentle." Her voice hardened. "But we did not forget what we are. We did not forget what we can become. And if you force us to remember, if you attack our colonies and kill our people, you will discover why every other species in the galaxy learned to leave humans alone." The Vorn leader swallowed hard. He looked at the data chip in his hand, then at the small human girl who had destroyed an entire elite unit. "We will leave," he said quietly. We will report what happened here. Do more than report, Una replied. Warn them. Tell every commander in your dominion what awaits them if they come to human space again. Tell them about the farmer's granddaughter who killed 40 soldiers with an old rifle and a knife. Tell them she was considered unremarkable among her people. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Tell them we have billions more just like me. The Vorn retreated to their ship. They did not look back. Within minutes they were gone, racing toward the stars to deliver their terrible report. Una watched them go, then turned to find the entire colony standing behind her. Her parents, her neighbors, the children she had grown up with. They looked at her with something between awe and gratitude. Young Tai-Ho stepped forward. What happens now? He asked. Una considered the question. The Vorn would not return to this colony, but the galaxy was vast and dangerous. Other threats would come. Other enemies would test humanity's resolve. Now we prepare, she said. We rebuild our defenses. We train our people. We remember what my grandfather taught me. She looked at the faces around her. Peace is precious, but it must be protected. We can be farmers and builders and scientists. We can be gentle and kind and loving, but we must never forget how to fight when fighting becomes necessary. Months later, a meeting took place in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to discuss a formal protest from the Vorn Dominion. The Vorn demanded that humans be classified as a Category 1 threat species, the highest danger rating in the galaxy. Their evidence included the helmet recordings from Velta 7, showing the systematic destruction of an elite military unit by a single teenage girl. The human ambassador, attending her first council session, listened to the accusations with a calm expression. When it was her turn to speak, she stood and addressed the assembly. The Vorn Dominion attacked our colonies without provocation, she said. They killed innocent civilians. They threatened to execute hostages. And when one brave young woman defended her home and her family, they call us the threat? She shook her head. We are farmers and scientists. We build and create and nurture. We want nothing more than peaceful coexistence with all species. She paused and her expression hardened slightly. But if any species attacks our people, we will defend ourselves. If any empire threatens our colonies, they will learn what humans are capable of. We did not conquer our world by being weak. We did not reach the stars by giving up when things became difficult. She looked directly at the Vorn representative. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that killed millions. We survived everything our world threw at us and kept moving forward. Do not mistake our preference for peace as an inability to wage war. Behind her, a holographic display showed an image of Una Park receiving a Medal of Honor from the colonial government. Small, young, unremarkable at first glance. But her eyes held something that made several council members shift uncomfortably in their seats. That girl, the ambassador said, is considered ordinary among our people. She had no military training, no special abilities, no advanced weapons. She had only her courage, her determination, and the skills her grandfather taught her. She let that sink in before continuing. Imagine what our extraordinary individuals could do. Imagine what our actual soldiers could accomplish. Imagine what would happen if all 7 billion humans on Earth decided that peace was no longer possible. The council chamber was silent. We offer friendship to all who want it, the ambassador concluded, but we also offer this warning. Do not attack humanity. Do not threaten our colonies. Do not harm our people, because we will remember, and we will respond. She sat down. The Vorn representative looked at the image of Una Park, the quiet girl who had killed 40 elite soldiers with nothing but an old rifle and the lessons of her grandfather. He thought about the human history files he had finally read, the endless wars, the terrible weapons, the absolutely relentless determination to survive. And for the first time in his long military career, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear, true fear, for what humanity could become if they ever stopped choosing peace. On Velta 7, Una Park stood by her grandfather's grave as another sunset painted the sky in shades of red and gold. The colony was rebuilding. Life was returning to normal. Children played in the streets again. She still practiced her shooting every morning in the forest valley, but now others joined her, young colonists who wanted to learn what she knew. She taught them the way Dong Su had taught her, with patience and care and respect for the deadly skills they were acquiring. "Why do we learn to fight?" one of her students asked. Yuna smiled, remembering her grandfather's words. "So that we can choose not to," she replied. "True peace comes from strength, not weakness. When you know you can defend yourself and your loved ones, you can offer friendship from a position of security instead of fear." She looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "The galaxy knows about us now. They know what humans can do when we have no other choice. Maybe that will make them think twice before attacking peaceful colonies." She shouldered her rifle and began the walk home. "And if they forget again? If they come back looking for easy targets?" Her smile faded into something harder. "Then we will remind them. The quiet girl nobody noticed had changed the galaxy, and the galaxy would never forget."